Hello, my name is Brandon Boyd, and this is Yahoo Music. My first solo effort, the Wild Trapeze, I did that one more out of just this weird kind of like, it just felt like I needed to go and go off into the forest somewhere and play all the instruments and really get out a bunch of sort of wiggles, if you know what I mean. Like I had all of these weird ideas that some of them could have turned into Incubus songs, and most of them probably wouldn't have. So they would have just sort of just sat in a computer somewhere. And but I had been playing guitar quite a bit and still hadn't really gotten any better at it. But was like my love of it had increased, even though I didn't really like improve very much. So I met Dave Fridman, and he had a studio off in the forest in upstate New York, and provided this wonderful opportunity for me to sort of indulge that inner control freak that drifts around in me sometimes. So when I was done with it, I actually had a little bit of a moment of deep vulnerability where I thought maybe I wasn't going to put it out, because I saw it for a very sort of brief moment. I saw it objectively, or as objectively as I possibly could see it. And it kind of freaked me out. I was like, wow, left to my own devices, I'm not that great of a musician. I'm definitely more of a singer and a lyricist. But then I got to this place where not only did my appreciation for being able to play with the guys in Incubus for as long as I have, that my appreciation for that kind of skyrocketed. Then I also sort of saw that the album was very kind of honest, and it was very revealing, and I think perhaps not in a good way, not in a bad way, it was just revealing, which is a good thing, I think, as artists to continue to learn how to reveal ourselves, reveal our innermost. To me, that's kind of the point. So I did it, and some people hated it, some people loved it. It still kind of drifts around out there, but I think it accomplished the right thing, which was it was just something I needed to do. Then we, made another Incubus record, If Not Now When, and that process was changed in subtle ways, and then in certain ways it was changed dramatically by my experience of doing this album on my own. So after we did our kind of 18-month world domination tour around If Not Now When, we all decided, and we needed kind of a break from that kind of intense touring and everything. So we decided to chill out for a minute. But then once again, this drive, so to speak, to continue to make music and make art just kept kind of coming through. It was as if I had opened up this sort of new doorway with the experience of the Wild Trapeze. And after we were finished with the Incubus record, which we did with Brendan OBrien, him and I continued to talk and kind of muse about writing songs together and seeing just what would happen. He'd produced 3 Incubus albums, but we had never sat down and sort of crafted a song just between the two of us. So we decided to try, and I sent him like a melodic lyric idea, and he got really excited about it, and he started playing some guitar on it, and that song turned out. It was the first song we wrote. It's called Lady Black. It's on the EP. And so we just kind of kept doing that, and eventually there were 12 or 13 or 14 songs. And the one thing that I knew I needed to do, and I had some nice sort of reinforcement from Brendan, was I needed to create a new idea around this sort of way that music was sort of coming out of me and through him in this collaboration, because it wasn't as much a solo project as it was just a new kind of music project. So I decided on the title, Sons of the Sea, and here we are today. I didn't have any reservations in working with Brendan OBrien for this new thing. I could see how somebody might, because he had so much to do with kind of the most recent sound of Incubus, or at least the last 10 years of Incubus in our production. I wasn't nervous about it, mostly because he's a lot of fun to work with. He brings out things in me that left to my own devices, sort of stay tucked away. He challenges me, which I think is really the most essential thing. But working with him as a songwriter and working with him as a musician really brought out another sort of layer. It peeled away another layer, which was really, really interesting. So things sort of emerged that would have never emerged writing an Incubus song. It's a little bit like, I'm going to apologize to Brendan for the analogy, but it's a little bit like going into a different sort of love relationship. You know, when you're in love with somebody, that particular person will bring out particular things in you, good and bad, hopefully more good than bad. And so writing music with the guys in Incubus, who I'm very much in love with, like it brings out something in me which I really enjoy, and fortunately, like over the years, lots of people have enjoyed too. So this is sort of like, it's like I started dating somebody else, and new sort of new things evolved and have been coming out, and new personalities have been showing up, which has been a lot of fun to indulge these new ideas and these new sort of personalities. I talked to Ben Kenny a little bit about the Sons of the Sea EP, and he was very complimentary. We share, him and I in particular, share a lot of music, because Ben is very active on his own as well. He's on tour in Europe right now, actually, with his solo stuff. And he gave me some really cool feedback, and he was very complimentary about the music. So coming from him as well, it meant a lot, because not only is he an old friend of mine, but I have a lot of respect and admiration for what he knows how to do and how he does it. He's a really crazy talented musician and songwriter, so it was cool. I don't know if the rest of the guys have heard this stuff. I haven't really talked to them much about it, but it's one of those things where it's like, maybe once again, like dating. It's like when you're married and you're dating somebody else, maybe some things are better left unsaid. I don't know. You know, who knows? Incubus does have some solid touring plans in the very near future. We're going to be doing about 3 weeks of shows in South America in November and December, with some of the shows are with the Dave Matthews Band. So that'll be really fun, I'm sure. There's a handful of the shows are in Brazil. I know we're going to do some stuff on our own in Mexico and Costa Rica and Peru. But yes, so there's lots of stuff for Incubus in the very near future. A new album, I don't foresee in the near future, but you never really know. Like we've been fortunate enough in our hard work and our successes that we've been able to sort of carve out a way of existing as a band that, like, when Muse shows up for us collectively, then we're like, okay, let's write music now. And if it doesn't, we're like, okay, let's not write music now. And it's a very sort of fortunate place to be in, because it wasn't always like that. We actually got really accustomed to, as a band, to having our sort of time. We would schedule our time. Like, we're going to go on tour from this date to this date, and when we get home from this tour, we're going to write a record. And we're going to get a record within that 8 weeks. And then we're going to go back on tour. And we did that for 15 years or something. So it's lovely to be in the place we are now. I'd say over the past probably 4 years, a handful of songs that have come out on albums have occurred to me in a dream, the last sort of dreams before you move into that fuzzy, I'm not quite awake but I'm not asleep state. And that's where I've been able to sort of grab onto them. And conscious enough where I'm like, this is a cool sounding thing. What is this? And I sort of filter through it and listen to it, and then wake up and have sort of hold on to it long enough where I can grab something to record it into. So yes, there's a couple of songs on the Wild Trapeze that occurred. There's a couple of songs on If Not Now When that occurred, and there's a handful on the new Sons of the Sea stuff where that occurred. In particular, this track is the first song on the album. It's called Jet Black Crow, and it all kind of, it was so complete in so many ways that I had full lyrics by like my first cup of coffee. You know what I mean? Like, it just arrived. That's interesting thing about, I refer to it as muse, almost like it's a personality or it's a thing sort of separate and distinct, even though it's not. But sometimes it feels sort of distinct from any one of us. Like it sort of just decides to show up uninvited. And most of the time I'm very happy to see her. Being from California, born and raised in Los Angeles, I'm certain that it has had an indelible influence on the way I write music and the kind of music that I write. Specifically, what parts, where, when, I don't really know, because I'm a little too close. I'm a little too close to the equation there. But I've heard that often, actually, ever since like 2001, when we put out the album Morning View. I started hearing that a lot. Like, you guys are such, it sounds so California. And I always thought that, thanks. Like, I love California. It's even a beautiful word, like California. It sounds like this mystical, magical place where good things happen and where rainbows end. And it is. So, yeah, I'll take it as a compliment. I'm actually really grateful to my parents for playing things in the car when I was a child, like the Beach Boys and like Harry Nilsson and ABBA. And they had such a weird sort of swath of music that they would play in the car and around our house. Andrew Lloyd Webber, God, what else? And then my older brother was into like heavy metal. So it's kind of making sense now. Like, the older I get, it makes sense. Like, my parents' music was the stuff we just mentioned before, and then my older brother, his music, which was very influential on me as well, was like Ozzy and Iron Maiden and Motley Crue. And then when I started choosing the music I was listening to, I was reaching for early on like The Cure, and they had a big effect on me early on for a number of reasons. But then I started getting into, like, it was the early 90s when I really started coming of age and this stuff. So I was reaching for like Primus and Mr. Bungle and John Zorn, and then I started getting into the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Rage Against the Machine, all these things. So throw all those things together, and here we are today. I would just be completely over the moon if anybody heard any Beatles stuff in there, because that, honestly, the Beatles, it almost goes without saying, but they're probably the most influential songwriters of ever. ever. And I actually remember very distinctly being in the car and hearing the song Strawberry Fields when I was like a baby. I remember being in a car seat and hearing it, and I remember it kind of staring off out the window as we were driving, and that really is like the first song that kind of like took me away, where I was sort of transported someplace. And then I heard like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and had the same thing. Like, so many of their songs really kind of like, they like grabbed me and pulled me away from wherever I was, and brought me perhaps in some occasions even further into the moment than I was. So thank you, Beatles. A lot of that you're hearing, we could have an entire other conversation with Brendan OBrien in the room too, because there is definitely a Brendan OBrien influence on this album sonically, and a lot of the music craft, like the guitar work and the way it interrelates with the piano and the bass stuff. And Brendan is not a lot, but a little bit older, than I am. And so he's drawing from a different set of influences than I am. I personally think that that's one of the reasons why Sons of the Sea is kind of interesting. If I'm able to look at it even with a mild objectivity, it's because you're taking two people who've worked together a lot in a certain capacity, and then you put them together in a new situation, and allowing for both of their sort of random, disparate influences to smash together, and you get something new, hopefully. And so I'm hoping that people hear all of those things and more. I have conceptualized with directors and sometimes with guys in the band a number of Incubus videos, and a lot of those ideas have come through, but I never like directed one. I edited an Incubus video once. We have a song called "Wish You Were Here," and we made like a really expensive, really elaborate, super psychedelic music video for it, and then it was supposed to come out the very, like right around now of 2001, and then a bunch of flew airplanes into buildings, and this horrible happened. We all know that story. And in our video, there was footage of us sort of leaping off of this bridge and jumping into water, and then mermaids come and save us. And the powers that be felt that it was insensitive to see people jumping off of a bridge, so the video was banned, and we needed something really quick. And so I compiled all of this sort of home video footage that we had from our album making experience at the Morning View house, and I put that video together. That was really my first and only, like, that was really, I like made that one. And but I like to sort of, there's so much of my influence, I think, in the lyric and in the melody of so many songs. There are certain elements I like to sort of outsource, for want of a better term. I like to sort of work with other artists to make a larger picture occur. So these lyric videos I made for Sons of the Sea were really my first attempt at actually being the guy behind the camera too, and the concept and the execution, and if there's any editing, most of them are just sort of one-shot things. But it was an interesting equation, if you will, to solve. Find a way to sort of present the lyrics in a clever way that sort of holds people, at least in some capacity, to the end of the song. And so I employed, like, my girlfriend. I employed, I didn't employ her. She did it for free. She better. It was fun, and I ended up searching like internet archives for copyright-free cartoons and footage and things like that, and I found a bunch of really fun old cartoons and utilized them, and it was really fun. It was a fun exercise. I'll probably do more of them. I'm very interested in film. I think film and I will probably intersect at some point in the future. I hope to do my first decade of it quietly, so I can, maybe when I present something, it'll be good ish. I hope one day that film and I intersect in some capacity. Yeah, it just published my third book of art and sort of poetry and photography. It's called So the Echo, and it is sort of it's the end result of the past 5 years of sketches, larger scale works, sketchbook experiments, Rorschach inkblot tests that went horribly, horribly right, shooting pictures sort of all over the world as I travel, and second cup of coffee musings on a typewriter or in my sketchbook and things like that. This one, of the 3 books I've done so far, this one is, I think I'm the most sort of proud of it, if I can indulge just a hint of pride for a second. It just, it has the most sort of like weight to it in a spiritual sense, but also in a literal sense. Like when you hold the book, it like feels good. It's like I think it's 156 pages or something like that. So it's more voluminous than the other books. And I think the work is better. I was much more focused on the work, and a lot of the work is very different than anything I've done before. I used these fun techniques of sort of spilling ink and spilling watercolor and letting them dry, and then allowing pictures to emerge, as opposed to going like, I'm going to draw a picture of a rabbit with a human body, like, which I did in the book as well. But those were a little bit more intentional. Most of the book, the paintings and drawings, are things that kind of like, they just emerged on their own. Like I found pictures in chaos, and it was really fun. And so it's an interesting experiment. I highly recommend it, actually, to anybody with any kind of creative bent. Music, visual art, any kind of art you want to call it. I see it all as art. I see it all as they're just basically mediums in a life of expressivity. I think that human beings, whether you are willing to admit it or not, every human being is inherently creative, like we all, whether it's something we're adapting to our bodies healing from something, the way that we choose to speak, the way we choose to interact, who we choose to interact with. These are all, to me, like, they're all creative decisions. So I think that's why I've been fascinated with art most of my life, is because, and for instance, with music, early on, I loved putting on headphones and listening to music, because you are quite literally listening to decisions that people are making someplace else or in a different time, or and occasionally those decisions that they make will change the way that you feel about yourself or about your loved ones or about you, the way you see the world. So it has potentially a lot of power. And then with visual art, you're seeing the same thing. You're seeing decision making sometimes more on an unconscious level. So all of it is fascinating to me. I see all of it as kind of the sort of comparison I've been using is there is a tree. If the tree is sort of art or expressivity, there are many sort of branches on it. So it really is, if you're climbing the tree, it's just a matter of like, which branch are you going to swing from that day. So to me, it's all kind of the same thing. At the moment, I am reading The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, which is a very interesting book. I have been a big fan of Henry Miller for a long time, very inspired by him. I just reread Jitterbug Perfume for the third time by Tom Robbins. It's a fantastic book still, even 15 years after reading it for the first time. Yeah, I like to read. It's fun. I think it's good for my brain, too. I don't want to say it's good for our brain, because some people reading hurts their eyes and they get crazy ideas. But for me, it seems to massage my brain and make me feel better about everything. I do occasionally get overloaded, and not that often, but there, I've had to actually learn how to, I guess you call it, relax. I've had to actually like practice non-activity, and I feel the most alive and the most sort of in tune and in flow when I am sort of busily like making something. But I found that the older I get, the more the art and my sense of well-being benefit when I sort of balance the non-activity with activity. You can busy yourself too much. I've found I can busy myself too much, and it ends up being a little bit like sometimes I feel like I'm spinning too many plates, and then they all start to kind of fall down, and then you feel like you're going to have a nervous breakdown. So meditating has been a really wonderful way of balancing those things out, because you are actively allowing your brain and your physiology to settle, and then everything goes away. And then what's interesting is you're sort of coming out of the meditation, the better you get at it. It's almost like you're making space. You're clearing out the clutter, and then better ideas start to rush through, which is really interesting. So